All right, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. Again, if you haven't yet, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Just to let you know, the webinar will be recorded and the recording will be made available after. So feel free to keep an eye out for the email with the recording after the webinar is complete. I am Cecilia Martinez. I'm a developer advocate for Appflow. Super excited to be on the team and to be presenting today for you. I am joined by product managers for Appflow. We have Matt Netko here. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Cecilia and everyone. So thrilled to be here.
Great. And then we're also joined by Ashwini Shukla. Hey, Ashwini.
Hi, everyone. So nice to be here and happy to have you all to talk to us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ashwini and Matt. Again, you can follow Matt at .netco on Twitter, and you can connect with Ashwini on LinkedIn. So the agenda for today, we're so excited to have everyone here to talk about some of the unique challenges faced by mobile developers. We'll be talking about Appflow and what makes mobile DevOps so complex, especially for enterprise organizations. We're going to cover how Appflow addresses the special needs of enterprise organizations, and we're super excited to demo some new features that we're rolling out. We will make sure to leave time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can use the Zoom Q&A function to submit questions to us. You can also use the chat to share comments or ask questions along the way, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. So again, you can use either the Zoom Q&A or the chat to share comments and ask questions. All right, we're going to start things off with a poll. So how does your company address mobile CI/CD today? We'll be launching the poll in Zoom. So on the center of your screen, you should see a pop-up window with the poll question. Again, it's how does your company address mobile CI/CD today? Either using a generic CI/CD tool like Azure DevOps, Travis, or Jenkins, using a mobile-specific CI/CD tool like Appflow, or performing mobile builds and deployments manually. So we'll give a minute for people to answer the poll. Again, you should see it pop up in the middle of your screen. Let us know if you have any issues with that. But how does your company address mobile CI/CD today? And while people are answering, I've seen a few more people join. So if you have joined, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat as well with your name, location, and your role. All right, so make sure that you answer that poll question. We'll be closing it here in just a minute. Awesome. Thanks for that comment, Owen. It's good to know. All right, and I think we may be ready to share the poll results. I'll give it a minute here for those to pop up. All right, so let's take a look and see. So it looks like the majority of you, 41%, are performing manual mobile builds and deployments. So for those of you, you're going to really be aware of a lot of the challenges that we're talking about today. Probably have experienced one or maybe all of them. It does look like some of you are using a mobile-specific CI/CD tool. So that's great. You are already aware of the benefits of mobile CI/CD. And around 30%, 35% using a generic CI/CD tool. So thank you so much for participating. That's really helpful information. And it seems like there'll be something for everybody to learn today. So the reason that we're here today is because we understand that mobile DevOps can be very frustrating. You know, you can't ship in 10 minutes or continuously the same way that you do with traditional CI/CD and web deployments. There's a lot of technical requirements that come with deploying mobile applications. You know, you have application signings, you have infrastructure requirements. And because of this, whenever you need to either fix a bug or there's a mistake that needs to be reverted, that process can be difficult. And pushing updates out to users is a tedious process that's often more delayed than we'd like. Additionally, there's a long tail of app versions that need to be supported. You're not just dealing with the web browser, you're dealing with a wide variety of devices, and managing all those requirements can get very complex. What we've seen is that traditional CI/CD does not have what it takes to support the specific needs of mobile deployments, right? So there's specific hardware infrastructure requirements required for deploying mobile applications, specifically iOS. There's also a need for cross-functional knowledge. So if you are a DevOps engineer and your knowledge is traditional CI/CD, you may not know all the intricacies of mobile deployments. In the same vein, if you're a mobile developer and you're really focused on building great applications for users, you may not necessarily need or want to learn all of the infrastructure and submission requirements for deploying your applications. So being able to understand the entire lifecycle development can be really frustrating. There's also all the App Store hoops that you have to jump through. In addition to asset requirements, there's various processes that need to be followed, approval process time that can delay deployments even more. There's also the ever-changing ecosystem. We've all seen it. There's lots of tooling. There's build stack requirements. Recently, we even saw this with Google Play and the API target requirements that need to be updated by November 1st to ensure that your applications are still discoverable in Google Play. That is a lot of things to be able to have to keep track of and to manage. For all these reasons, that's why we built Appflow. It's a DevOps platform designed specifically for building, deploying, and updating mobile applications. It's a fully managed mobile DevOps platform that's made to address those specific needs. We've seen a lot of organizations that understand these pain points and see the benefits of Appflow. More than 300 organizations, in fact. So Appflow is trusted by more than 300 teams today to push and update their mobile applications. So as we talk to these 300 plus customers, we hear about the challenges that they're facing, especially at enterprise organizations. So mobile deployments are already complex. Then you add on the intricacies of enterprise organizations, and it becomes even more challenging. I'd love to hear from the chat what blockers exist for mobile CI/CD at your organization. So you can use the chat in Zoom here. I'm going to give a couple minutes for people to respond, but we're specifically looking for any issues, blockers, problems, things that you run into when deploying your mobile applications at your organization. So I'll give a few minutes here for people to respond. Certificate handling. Yep, absolutely. That's a big one. And so, yeah, so any of the issues that you deal with, plugin installation issues, yes, having to deal with that, with the installing the dependencies required for your builds before you can deploy, orchestrating that, hardware requirements, definitely see that all the time as well. So again, feel free to use the chat to throw your answers in there, any blockers that you've run into, any issues that you've seen at your organizations when it comes to deploying your mobile applications. Yep, building for Apple. I've definitely thought with that myself a bit. All right, Joshua, yeah, permissions for deployments belong to one person only. If that person is gone or busy, we cannot deploy. So we definitely see that, right? Where we're kind of at the mercy of a different team or an organization. In one case, it could be a single person that can block releases, even if there's something mission critical that needs to be deployed. Certificates and mobile provisioning. Yes, that's a great one, Stefano. Thank you for that. All right, yeah, so App Store policies updates. Yes, thank you. So as we can see, it's not an easy process to get mobile applications deployed at enterprise organizations. Please feel free to keep throwing your answers in the chat, but let's talk about what we hear as well from these companies that use Appflow. So one of the things that we see is this double-edged sword of freedom of choice when it comes to the tech stack that teams are using. So developers like to choose the tech stack that works best for them, and that makes a lot of sense in order to develop the best applications that you can. But the team that's responsible for developing may be siloed from the deployment team. So kind of like what Joshua was saying, you're waiting for somebody else or a different team, and you're dependent on them in order to provision the requirements, the infrastructure, and the resources in order to be able to deploy. This can cause knowledge silos and communication gaps whenever you have to hand off that process, and a lot of things can get lost in translation. What happens is that you end up having to share knowledge between teams and build skill sets out in order to support the entire software development lifecycle for mobile applications. It can get really complicated. The other side of that is if you don't have a centralized DevOps team, or you're not necessarily required to use specific resources, then what happens is each team has to figure it out on its own, depending on what framework you use or what deployment strategy you have. And that can result in even more knowledge silos. This makes it really important to be able to have a tool that can abstract out some of those complexities. If you have a mobile development team that's responsible for deploying its own applications, and it's responsible for managing all of the stack requirements, bringing in the certain infrastructure requirements, hardware, the different versions that you're supporting, the APIs that you're leveraging in order to build those versions, that can end up being the responsibility of a single person on a team. We also hear that there's vendor or business requirements that can result in even more fractured tooling. And if you think about enterprise organizations, this is an exponential problem. You may have dozens or even hundreds of different teams that are having to work together. This also leads to competing constraints. This is another blocker that we hear from our customers. You have people competing with competing priorities for DevOps resources. The existing CI/CD infrastructure may not meet the needs of mobile teams. It may not be optimized for mobile, and that can create really inefficient pipelines where you're constantly trying to fix build errors that are resulting from using traditional infrastructure for mobile deployments. Additionally, there's also a lot of times very specific requirements for security. There's processes that you have to follow, and competing for hardware and software resources that can slow down deployments. Mobile development teams really want to release quickly to get their applications out to users, but that is slowed down on the deployment side. So you may have different experiences across different platforms, which is not great for you as developers, but also for your users. So, we hear that at Appflow, and we're here to solve those specific challenges as well. So I'm actually going to turn it over now to Matt to talk about a very exciting release to streamline mobile DevOps for even more enterprise teams.
Awesome. Thanks, Cecilia. Hey, everyone. Matt here. So I'm really thrilled to announce a new collection of features and services geared around security conscious enterprises in particular, as we saw from Cecilia covering all those different challenges. Really a common theme that we've noticed working the past few years with our Appflow customers in the mobile industry, mobile DevOps in particular, is, if you really put an umbrella on it, is security. So we are thrilled to show off some of our Appflow Enterprise Cloud offerings we're going to unveil today. And so what does this kind of bucket include, right? So a lot of this has to do with complete control over your source code, which can be a challenge for larger companies that want to move faster and use CI/CD systems, but are sort of held back by different IT policies and security concerns. Alongside of that is ownership of assets and build artifacts that inevitably, when you use traditional CI/CD services, all of those have to host and maintain. And on top of that is the concerns of insurance around the code that you have written and built, making sure that that is the code that ends up on user devices and you don't run into man-in-the-middle attacks or other security type issues like that. And then, of course, consumer data protection and privacy laws are a big factor more and more. And so you want to be able to obfuscate any consumer related data. And last thing is really mitigating risk from, frankly, our own employees through SSO support. So speaking of single sign-on, this is, as I kind of mentioned, a major security consideration. Our own personnel, our own employees, oftentimes when we see data leaks and other breaches that comes from compromised employees and phishing attacks, things like that. So one of the key major aspects of this, which of course, the Appflow Enterprise Cloud supports is single sign-on support, which allows you to mitigate the risk of turnover with employees, other changes to permissions as folks move between roles and get promoted, things like that, where their access needs to change. So with Appflow, what's really great about this is, any team can use the same SSO provider that you're already using for other applications, and especially third-party software like an Appflow type service, and make sure that you're keeping your mobile CI/CD pipelines secure and free from unintended access, which of course really, especially with your company's applications, web, mobile, or otherwise, are really the key to the kingdom here. And so it's absolutely critical that you protect and maintain those so that you are protected. So next up is really something that I'm very, very excited to roll out and talk about, and that is, over the past 3 years, we've had you may be aware of our live updates service, which is a very unique and sort of service and feature of Appflow that, because we're building with web technologies, when you're using Cordova or Capacitor, we are able to tap into, and that essentially allows you to deploy web content and images and business logic changes to your mobile iOS and Android apps without going through the App Store review process, which typically takes several days. So the core power of this is the ability to fix bugs and ship new updates, maybe do some A/B testing. Really, the sky's the limit there. However, the challenge that we've run into with companies, again, on the security front, is this first item, which is the sharing of source code. So we've heard a lot of concerns from you all over time, and especially as security becomes more forefront throughout the world and more companies are becoming heavily focused on building their own software. It's source code is their, just everything to the organization, and protecting that is critical. So the ability to just really share your source code willy-nilly with any CI/CD provider is often a non-starter for companies. You need to maintain complete control of the code, make sure it doesn't leave your walls, things like that. So next up is, in a similar vein, a lot of companies like yours probably have strict regulations around where your assets and build artifacts can live. So where they're hosted and what public and private access looks like that. And so what I'm going to show off here and thrilled to announce is our new self-hosted live updates offering, which takes a lot of these security concerns into play and effectively allows you to comply with your security and IT team policies while still using the power of our live updates service. So you're able to comply with different restrictions, but benefit from the instant app update workflow that live updates powers. So, and ultimately, what this means is Appflow is still involved in some fashion of it, as you'll see in a moment here, but we handle the distribution, caching of live updates, and provide rollback and roll forward type of capabilities if you want to, basically maintain those live updates and control how they go out, while all still maintaining complete control of your assets and artifacts within your own infrastructure. And then there's a couple more features on this, and then we'll actually jump into a demo here in a second. So the other aspect of this is, of course, the ensuring that if you're going to be shipping these code updates, that they're controlled and are maintained by your teams. And so for added insurance, that what we've really heard from customers is that, you want to guarantee that the code that your devs have written is ultimately what ends up on your end user devices, right? So if you're doing this and bypassing those App Store review processes, that's just critical. So you want to make sure that is what's happening. So as part of these new live updates, we offer a code signing feature, basically ensuring with a public and private key set that we have a key handshake that require that code remains unmodified before it is applied to the user's device, and we guarantee that. And the last consideration that we've heard and have integrated now into live updates, and particularly the self-hosted option, is the accessibility of clients' data and identifiable information. Because while the live updates themselves should not and will not have user identifiable information, the workflow process historically has that potential to expose URLs and other IP addresses and things like that. So with some additional configuration settings for live updates within Appflow, enterprises can leverage your own proxy URL as a means of communicating the availability and ultimately the delivery of live updates to your end user's device, effectively obfuscating where they're being hosted from and where they're being delivered to. So that's a new configuration setting that could be set to your own URL, then proxy the request so that end user information is not shown. All right. And so I'm really excited to kind of show this off, but here's kind of a, general workflow of our newer self-hosted option. And really what this is if we look left to right, it might seem complex at first, but we've really broken it down to be as simple as possible. So as I mentioned, a lot of this, because of the requirements of not sharing source code and some code signing aspects and things like that, means that a lot of the process moves to your infrastructure, so you maintain that control. So looking left to right again, when you have, this is really showing off like what happens when we have a new live update that we want to build and deploy. So starting with number one there, you'll perform a normal web build, of course, whatever framework you're using, whatever web tooling, that's all. It doesn't really matter. Anything and everything is supported. And then what we have is we've added some new features and commands to our Ionic Cloud CLI, which is our tool that we allow for users to access into the Appflow infrastructure, but from within their own CI/CD platforms like Azure, AWS, and really anything that can run a pipeline. So what we do in step 2 is basically bundle up that live update, take that web build and do some minor changes to it to make it live updates ready. And with this new process, we're signing it with a private key that you maintain within your infrastructure. And then you will be in charge of uploading it to whatever your storage data provider of choice is. That could be Amazon S3, Azure Data Storage, as I'm going to show in my demo in a second here. Really, again, as long as it can host static assets, anything can be used. And then we register the artifact, the live update, with Appflow. So Appflow is still in the middle there, part of the coordination of and deployment of that live update. So you give us basically as little metadata as possible to let us know that there's a new live update available, such as that artifact URL where it's hosted. Here in the image I'm using example.com, just made up, and it's a zip file at the end there. And then you have a couple options. You can deploy it with our Cloud CLI, again, in sort of an automated fashion. If you have all these different pipelines and checks made up so that when you have a production ready build that's ready to go out, you can do it in an automated fashion in step 5 there. Or kind of moving to the middle, you can always manually control with the Appflow web UI when these updates go out, and what channel and what basically what deployment that you want and which type of user and environment that they get access to. You can also do things like view all the list of previous live updates, roll back to different updates, or even go forward again, and set different things, some metadata around native versioning restrictions, like specifying that a live update only works within a certain minimum or maximum iOS or Android version range, for example. And then finally, what happens is when down on the user device, when they open up your mobile app, we have a new capacitor-based live update plugin that's built with native iOS and Android libraries. And so what that's going to do is basically call back when the user opens the app to Appflow and say, hey, do I have a new live update available for whatever production channel I'm on, such as production? And if it does, then it'll be downloaded, not from Appflow, but again, back to your infrastructure, wherever you registered that live update. And then before it's actually applied to your device, we verify it with the public key that's stored within the capacitor-based application in this case. So that's kind of a high-level overview. Let's really quick pivot over to a real example here. So I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, Cecilia. Okay. All right. Okay, so what I have is all set. Sorry. Okay. Excellent. So what I have is I'm going to use QuickTime to show this off. I have what we call our Ionifits demo app, which is an Angular-based application. Again, built with any web tech is really works with Ionic and what we support, and using Capacitor here. If you've been on a previous webinar with me, you've probably seen this before. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to deploy a live update live on the webinar today, right now, in just a few moments. But here is my actual iPhone connected to my computer, and we'll show that off. So first, let's kind of walk through what's required to configure this from the capacitor side. So as I mentioned, we've built a brand new capacitor-based live update plugin for this, and we're really excited about that. That's going to become more widely available to the rest of our Appflow users beyond the enterprise in due time, but for now it's launching for this self-hosted option. And one of the things we've done here is configured it within our capacitor config file. If you've used that before, that's really the standard spot where we configure plugins. So there's just a few metadata items that I have to set, such as my Appflow app ID. That's just a unique identifier that Appflow creates for me and my application. The channel is very important. That is, again, the deployment setting. Basically, what we do is we configure our end user devices to listen to a particular channel. And that typically could be things like QA, dev, staging, production, or test flight, or whatever you want to name them. The sky's the limit. I just happen to be just reusing this one called testing. And so my actual iOS app here is configured to watch for this channel, and that's where we're going to deploy the live update to. We're going to use the background update method, which basically means when the app is opened, it's going to phone home to Appflow and see if there's any live updates available. We have some options here with max versions to cache previous live updates. So if you end up rolling back, the process is really smooth there because it's cached on the user device. And then finally, this new item here, the public key, is stored within my capacitor application at the root level. And so I can kind of show that off. And so that gets embedded in the device because that's how we verify with that code signing feature that nothing has been tampered with. So in addition, just some steps I'm not going to show, like installing the plugin and other things like that. That's pretty much it in terms of configuring the application. So let's go back to the next setup. So now we're going to look at and use Azure DevOps in this particular instance. So I have a great pipeline here I'm going to show off that integrates all these tools. But first, I've done a couple of setup steps, including because we're going to have Azure host the live updates and not Appflow. I've created a storage account, and then within that, I've got a data storage container with live updates appropriately named. And you'll see here, I have a couple live updates that are live in there. Bundled name with, I'm using the git commit, as you'll see, is to kind of make them unique and host them. And so these will actually be the ones that get deployed to my device here in just a moment. Over here, and really where the magic comes in, is I have a self-hosted pipeline example, and we'll have documentation and everything to share later on that. So let's watch through this really quick. So basically, we're setting up a couple of variables, such as that name of the final output live update name that'll get uploaded to blob storage. I've got my live update artifact path that I've kind of been able to hard code here and make it somewhat dynamic that we'll use to register and tell Appflow that that's where these are from. And then honestly, there's just a handful of steps to implement that workflow I just showed. Our typical npm install on my application, npm run build essentially to build my Angular app. That'll look basically the same for everyone. And then where it gets interesting is the use of the Cloud CLI. So we install that into the pipeline. Next, we download that private key that I had created a little before. That private key, and same with access tokens, things like that, is under my pipeline library, stored encrypted by Azure automatically. And so I use a download secure file task to pull that out so that the pipeline can reference it in a moment here. Then again, I'm going to bundle that web artifact using our new bundle artifact command. And really to mention here, what we're doing is pointing it to the build directory, which because it's an Angular app, it's www. And then passing in that private key so that we can sign it, that compiled live update. And then I'm mentioning like when it's done, create the live update zip file name, which will be live update dash bundle dash whatever the get commit ID for this particular get commit is. Finally, I'm going to upload it to Azure Storage. There's a bunch of helper commands. I'm using the Azure CLI as it just so happens to upload it to blob storage. And really giving that compiled file name, that web bundle. And then the last magic here is one more cloud command, which is actually registering it back with Appflow. So again, I'm telling it, okay, I have my app ID that this is going towards. I'm specifying the artifact URL that we built up earlier and we hosted in blob storage. So that will actually be like one of these. If I take a look, you can kind of see the URL here. And then I have the option to provide some metadata like the get commit reference, the SHA, the branch that we're using, things like that. So just so I have like some information over in Appflow about what it is and keeping that dynamic. And that's really it. So I'm not going to run this. It'd be a little boring. You know what this looks like essentially, but we're going to see the end result and actually see it on a device to wrap this up. So over here, this is Appflow, and I'm within my self-hosted Ionic version here. And I've got a number of builds that I've created, and that's what they end up looking like when we run this pipeline. You can see it's called an uploaded artifact. Traditionally, if we had built with Appflow, you'd see a full build log, but we're mentioning, hey, this is uploaded externally, right? And it's going to be a customer hosted build. But what we can do in here, again, we could do it with the Cloud Client, but I'm going to show off today, is I have this particular commit that is kind of sets the baseline for what our screen looks like. I'm going to change the login screen live for us. So this is it. It's a kind of Ionic logo. Welcome to Ionic in a blue button, right? And so what we're going to do is it's set to this channel, the iOS testing one. We're going to deploy to this one, which is where if I kind of look at this from my commit, I've added and tweaked it to an Appflow logo and made some other changes. So with this deploy live updates button, in just a couple clicks, I can assign it to that channel, iOS testing, and hit deploy. And instantly this is available to my end users or any devices that are listening. So let's go back and see how that works. So what'll happen is the next time the user app is open, so I'm going to close it and then reopen it. And so what's happening here is the app is downloading the live update all in the background. So from the end user experience, they don't see anything. They can use the app. There's no disruption. And then what'll happen is the next time they open that up again, or maybe the device is rebooted, basically whenever the app comes back into view, and I'll kind of close that out there and open it one last time. Voila, we've got our live update deployed. So you'll notice immediately we've now got a purple login button. I swapped out an image, so that's been downloaded and replaced with the Appflow logo, and our text has changed on the login page to be a self-hosted edition. So pretty cool. Just kind of give an idea of the different content and assets we can change. We could also do things like, again, business logic and really all different types of changes, but that's just kind of to show how fast and easy it is to deploy this. And again, it's all coming from my Azure infrastructure here and this pipeline. The only thing that Appflow has is really the some of the deployment metadata and the ability to deploy those live updates. Awesome. So thank you very much. We're going to go back to Cecilia sharing. Okay, just one moment.
All right. So hopefully y'all can see my screen now.
Yes, looks good. Cool. Okay. So that is, again, we kind of mentioned SSO. We definitely mentioned our really exciting new offering for self-hosted live updates. But this year especially has been a major, we've put security at the forefront, which we've always done with Appflow for the past 5+ years, but we have been on a roll with security updates, changes, tweaks, mandates this year. So we did not stop there in terms of security with live updates. We also have been working towards a SOC 2 certification. We have always prided ourselves on putting security first at Appflow as a team, and really Ionic, the company in general. We already do a lot to keep your data safe, your interactions secure, but we, again, following this theme, we wanted to give you even more peace of mind with an official certification, official stamp of approval from third-party auditors. So I'm thrilled to share that by the end of 2022, it should be much sooner than that, we're going to achieve our SOC 2 Type 1 certification, with the Type 2 certification closely following that in the new year. So thank you so much. I think
Awesome.
Back to Cecilia.
Yes, thank you so much, Matt, for that great demo, all that wonderful information. So as you can really see, our goal at Appflow is to provide the benefits of a mobile CI/CD platform to as many teams as possible. So with Appflow Enterprise Cloud, this makes live updates accessible to teams that previously couldn't use it because they require these additional security features. When you have a streamlined system that you can use across multiple teams, that just really helps to expedite the onboarding and training for your developers. You have fewer information silos and faster releases. So we also wanted more teams to be able to benefit from Appflow regardless of what framework that they use to develop. So for improvements there, I'm going to turn it over to Ashwini for another exciting update.
Great, thanks, Cecilia. Thanks everyone for joining today. Matt shared a really great update about security in Appflow and all the exciting that are coming with live updates feature. I do hope you guys are excited about it as much as I am, and looking forward to giving it a try. But we do have other exciting news with Appflow as well. When we were talking, when Cecilia was going over all those challenges with the enterprise organizations and how those are unique challenges when it comes to mobile CI/CD, and our approach to that is to solve for having more flexibility in framework selection, because as an enterprise organization, you may have more than one teams working on applications, but somehow offer you a tool that can streamline the entire mobile CI/CD infrastructure for you, so that knowledge sharing becomes easier, the management of your mobile application deployment becomes easier. And we are excited to announce today that we are now actually expanding beyond Ionic platform and have support now for React Native available for everyone in Appflow. So if you have teams within your organization building React Native apps, and you already are benefiting from the ease of deployment that Appflow provides for your Ionic applications, please bring them on, and they can have those benefits too when it comes to deploying React Native applications. But definitely we're not going to be stopping there. We do want to continue to enhance your capabilities when it comes to enterprise, to be able to build applications using various other technology stacks as well. So we're actively working on adding support for pure native as well. So keep your eyes on us as we get ready to get that launch here in near future, and we'll be sharing that news with you all soon as well. And then to kind of quickly show you how you can get started with your React Native applications in Appflow, I will do a quick demo. All right, so if you're new to Appflow or not seen this before, this should kind of demonstrate for you how easy it is to get started with Appflow with your React Native applications. And you can see we have these sample applications in our organization where you can see we're building Ionic applications, we're building React Native application, capacitor applications. So you kind of see that variety and the flexibility that you have. In terms of adding a new React Native application, all you have to do is go to your Appflow account and import your application, give it a name, So I'll just do demo RN today. Choose your mobile architecture, which would be React Native in this case. You probably already have your GitHub connected, but we do have other options as well if you are choosing other setup for your source codes. And then you basically import it. And you pick a repository that you want to give it access to. And that's it. That's it. With just a couple of clicks, you actually have your React Native application imported. It detected that it is a React Native application. So if you have multiple applications and you want to have kind of an identifier in terms of which application is which, it's very easy to see that. And then it pulls in some of the basic, your first, like most recent commits, so you can immediately get started building your application. So in the interest of time, I'm going to switch back to my previous import so you guys can see how once here you kind of just get started with an building an application. You just pick your target platform, whether you're building your iOS, Android, just pick a build stack that's most suitable for your application and the type of build you're building, depending on your needs at the time. Just give it some other configuration. If you have some specific environment configurations you want to use, you can set those up as well. And then if you are overriding other native configurations like your build ID or app name, you can set those up here as well. So I am going to go back to my commits, just do a quick start build. We can pick the, if you want an App Store deployment, I'm just going to go to my signing certificate, pick a native configuration and kick off the build. And that's it. That you can get started with just a couple of clicks. And if right now you can see it's running, is building my Native iOS artifact for my React Native application. And when the build is successful, here are my couple of previous builds, for one for iOS and one for Android. And you can go in those successful builds, you can see the details. And then you can download your build artifacts if you choose to just download and have a separate process for uploading to the App Store. But as you can always go to your deployments history and automate it by actually setting all your connections to your App Store deployments and Google Play Store deployments and get those builds uploaded. And with the automation is really easy. You just start here, you start the build and the build gets done, it gets deployed, and everything is out there in like no time. So yeah, if you have other questions about the React Native application support, please ask, give us some comments in the chat or ask in the Q&A. But yeah, we're really excited that we are now able to expand Appflow's capabilities with the other teams in your enterprise organization. And we'll continue to do that with some of the exciting other new mobile architectures that are coming down the pipe for us. Over to you, Cecilia.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashwini, for that exciting demo. So yes, you can get started with React Native today. We did cover a lot, and I know that there's questions. So just to recap really quickly, we talked about how you can ship bug fixes and content changes the minute they're ready using live updates, now available on your own infrastructure with self-hosted live updates. We also talked about how you can streamline app delivery with all of the other great Appflow features like built-in automations, packaging, and App Store distribution. We talked about security updates that we're making, including SOC 2 Type 1 compliant certification coming before the end of this year. And also how you can standardize your mobile DevOps tooling across your entire enterprise organization, whether you're using Ionic or React Native to build your applications. Awesome. So if you have any questions or would like to get started with either any of the features that we talked about today, for React Native builds, you can actually, if you already have an Appflow account, just start importing your apps, just like Ashwini showed, in order to start deploying. For access to Appflow Enterprise Cloud, again, if you're already an existing Appflow customer, you can reach out to your customer success manager. If you are new to Appflow, you can use the link right on the screen, and we'll also pop it here in the chat as well, in order to talk to us at Appflow and get your questions answered and learn how it could be a good fit for your organization. So, all right, so I have seen some questions come through. Again, just wanted to leave this up here so you can grab the link. Again, make sure that you go in and check out React Native. Let your other teams know at your organizations that are using React Native that they can get started today. So let's go ahead and answer some questions. All right, so it looks like we have quite a few. I'm going to start just by confirming, Matt, there was a question on whether DigitalOcean Spaces is also supported in addition to S3 buckets and wherever you can store your code for live updates.
Oh yeah, good question. I actually am not familiar with that solution, but I more than likely would say yes. Ultimately, if the static file can be hosted, and in this case, it's a zip file is the requirement, then it should be yes. And it needs to be publicly accessible over the internet so that the live update plugin on your end users' devices can pull and download that live update. So if it can do that, then it should be supported. We really worked hard to ensure that we weren't tied to any one CI/CD provider, as you can see. And as we all know, there's many out there, and everyone's using something different, especially at the enterprise level with different custom solutions. So should be.
Great. And so there were a couple questions that are similar, but if you could go into some more detail about how live updates work, specifically how they're different from an App Store like update or a native update, and also how live updates are counted in Appflow.
Sure. So when we change the native portion of our applications, so that's Swift, Objective-C, Java, Kotlin, portions of Android, those require App Store review processes. There's no really way around that because of the fact that it's the native mobile device, the languages and tied to that hardware. And so how a live update really works, though, is we're building with a hybrid approach, or web native as we're now calling it, with Capacitor and the Ionic stack, or really any web framework. And because we're building our applications with web technologies and running effectively in web views that are embedded in native applications that your users end up using on their device, just like a traditional native app, we have this unique ability to roll out live updates and based on that web content. So what ends up happening is, because this is web-based code, we don't need to go through an App Store review process. We can compile that web application. Could be the entire application, or if you've heard of one thing I didn't mention is, if you've heard of our newer Ionic Portals project, you can also use live updates with that as well, if you have a traditional iOS or native Android project. And how that effectively works is, when we download and grab that live update from Appflow, we are applying it and saving it to the file system on the device, and then pointing your application to that new version of it, and telling the web view basically, hey, now it's time to render and display this version of the application to the end user. So another common kind of thread, of course, that comes up is, is this allowed with Apple's terms of service and Google Play? I loved everyone's answers to the challenges in the beginning about that. Really, if we were honest, settled around Apple, who are notorious for different challenges, but that's another topic. But one of those things, is rejections and getting through that process. And so it is a common cause for concern. And but I'm happy to report, and again, we've been over I just looked this up, hundreds of millions of live updates we've sent out over, 5+ years now, with hundreds of enterprise companies. No one's had any App Store troubles with that. That is totally allowed to update web-based content in their terms of service. The only challenge, of course, would be if you were to change the functionality, the core functionality of the application in kind of a malicious way. So say that you had a line of business app and you changed it to be a gambling app or a Bitcoin miner or something more extreme, then yes, you would get in trouble for that and the app would be pulled. But if you're updating feature by feature, some of the, I happen to show visual UI changes, design changes, things like that, totally above board and acceptable.
Awesome, thank you. And could you talk a little bit too about the different update options for live updates? So you mentioned background updates, but is there a possibility where a background update could subscribe to events? That way, when the user opens the app next time, then the update's installed?
Yes. So this is as part of the self-hosted effort here, this new project. This is the first phase of many that we're planning and new enhancements. Because of that, we also took this opportunity, as I mentioned, to build a new capacitor-based plugin for it. For those that have been using Appflow or are aware, our original Live Updates Classic solution was built with Cordova. And while that's worked really well for many years, from an innovation standpoint, including things like background updates and some other things I can't talk to just yet, but some other like changes we want to offer some more cool UX and things like that, we realized we had to build it in native libraries and then expose them with a capacitor plugin. And one of those is, as you saw, I had to close the app a couple times to really show that update. So yes, that is something that we are planning. Eventually, I don't have a timeline to allow more cool things like automatic downloads in the background so that the users really can get the updates almost instantaneously. So I hope that answered that one. But yeah, that's something we're really looking forward to.
Great, thank you. And then the other questions that we saw were related to kind of like plan related questions when it comes to live updates, particularly if a live update refers to the actual deployment of the code, if it refers to the number of devices it's going to, and what limits there may be for different types of plans. I don't know if that's a more of a question for a different team, but I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So today we work with your teams, in terms of the cost estimation, it varies. That's why we don't have published pricing at the enterprise level, because it really does. It really does vary on a lot of different factors, such as the number of apps that you're going to use, the number of live updates. We also have additional add-on services like support and advisory that we can walk you through setting those up. We can do code reviews, architecture reviews, like really the sky's the limit. So it's hard to give an exact ballpark price. But how those live updates work on a numerical standpoint is it's not it basically is every time one update is downloaded to a device, that counts as one live update. So you could have really when I showed on the phone was 2 live updates, because I had my first initial kind of baseline update that set that login screen, and then a second live update changed the screen. So that's 2 for one user, because I'm on the same device essentially. It's not really at a user level. So that's actually something that's really interesting. We have heard, over the years, concerns of like understanding, how many live updates do I need? Do I need 50,000? Do I need 1 million? What does that look like based on how many apps I have, the users I've got, a lot of different factors? It can be tough to figure out. So something newer that we are exploring and likely to dig deeper into is kind of like unlimited live updates that are more charged on a per user basis. So as you can imagine, when you come to us and say, hey, I am a not quite a Facebook level company, but I have 1 million users. What does that look like for me? I definitely need millions of live updates, but I don't want to, I want it to be affordable and sustainable. So that's where we'll work with you in different tiered pricing and some discounts there to get that into, a more kind of acceptable range. So if you are, I saw some comments, if you are, whether you're an existing customer of ours or not, or have live update enterprise plans, I encourage you to reach out with that contact form, or if you have a customer success manager that you're working with, ask them about unlimited / per user pricing, and they'll be happy to tell you more.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much for all those great answers to the questions. I know we're coming up to the end of the hour here. And so, yeah, thank you so much for everyone for the great questions that you asked, for all the comments and participation. We hope that you can start building with some of these great features at your enterprise organizations and start to solve some of the challenges that you're facing. Again, this webinar is being recorded, and a recording will be sent out after the webinar. So keep an eye out for your email if you'd like to share this with others or to review anything that we covered. Great, thank you so much.